politics is messy and can be overwhelming, but I can't speak for every individual of why they, what was the catalyst that got them into it or out of it. Obviously we've had over the last couple of years, plenty to choose from, whether that's positive or negative, like not positive, negative, but what forced you into politics or just like, hey, I need to step back from this. Like, I really don't want to get in this. This is so divisive, or, I can't have a conversation with my family, whatever it is, for people that choose that. But, I mean, like I said, for me, it was the Brett Kavanaugh and it taught me a lot in that sort of time period. I think, and I might be getting away from your original question with this, but
I didn't really have a question. It was just me rambling. So you go ahead.
But those couple events that happened, I mean, COVID, George Floyd, Kyle Rittenhouse, gosh,
Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade. That was a hard one, right? That came right out before our general election. Remind me to come back to that point, but
sure.
What we saw with all of this is that we really did see where people kind of stood, or like you said, were squishy and didn't stand.
Right.
People are like, yeah, I'm Republican or conservative. And it's like, okay, but like, where are you? Like, where are your thoughts? I think it really did cause people to think where they stood. And that happened not only in the politics, but then also in church. I mean, how much did we see this with people either leaving church or, I know, not necessarily politics involved and I don't want to talk about that necessarily here, but, COVID with them shutting down so many churches, you step out of line, you have to look at it on virtual. You're not in communication with people, in community with people. And there was a couple of things that were kind of being said that we were like, okay, maybe we need to look for a different church at this time, or we're trying to look for something else too, and so you saw where the church was, you saw where it stood, and the people that really stood against the government and the government overreach in churches, those churches, they got really pushed hard. I know, like, the guys in California, I think.
Oh yeah, your John MacArthur's church.
But then there's another one I can't remember. But anyways, I mean, they were getting fined after fine after fine from the government, but their church just continued to grow, and we saw a population growth. Just was really, really cool because people were searching. But then you also saw a lot of people leave too for various reasons. But so we saw this with the church, we saw this with politics, that people were kind of just figuring out. But for us, it was actually a really hard time in my life with COVID and kind of all of this leading up to with politics, because we saw, and maybe this is the same for you guys, but I was so mad about where things were and how people were treating other people in terms of COVID and sort of the distancing that was happening, sometimes necessarily, sometimes unnecessarily. Everyone had to do what they felt was best for their health. But and then you saw that coupled with all the political stuff and all the bad that was happening in the political stuff. And it was just really unfortunate. And I don't really know where I'm going with this point. So
it's fine. But, I understand your sentiment of just kind of, there's just this separation, and that kind of this just anger that kind of came over a lot of us. And I've openly admitted, where I might not have been posting and blasting on Facebook, but I was angry. And honestly, to a certain extent, very unhealthy way.
Same here.
I was really angry. And so the Lord really had to kind of work. And I think the podcast was kind of a part of this, where we wanted to find a civil way to be able to discuss these issues. We'd love to have people that are on different sides of the political aisle. I think that would be wonderful. But to have healthy disagreements and to, hear people's voices instead of looking at a Facebook post and kind of putting in your own tone into that. I like that, you're able to see me, we're able to look at each other in the eye. If you're going to insult someone, at least do it to their face. That's my rule. But another kind of spout of political nastiness that's probably, because it kind of settled down for just a touch. And of course, it never stays that way for long. We had the Roe v. Wade draft was leaked. Alito's draft was leaked, which has never happened. Haven't found the person who leaked it, by the way. Yeah. And then as I thought. Connor was a bit more skeptical, but I was like, yeah, this is gonna get overturned. And sure enough, it did. And it was probably the best day of my life. I thought it was just the most wonderful thing in the world. It's just everything that, you know, a lot of people much more dedicated than me had been praying for with a lot of the churches. And the one thing I noticed, and I'll get your thoughts on this, so it's not just like me rambling and then you have to try to respond. But we had some churches that would not acknowledge it on the pulpit, that decided that they were willing to acknowledge George Floyd. They weren't willing to acknowledge one of the bigger wins, not the full win, because there's a lot of work to be done, right? So that was really disappointing. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts on Roe v. Wade itself, what your reaction was. I don't know how intimately involved you are with the pro-life movement. I imagine you're pro-life. I imagine that. Hopefully I'm not assuming, kind of am, but just kind of getting your general overall thoughts on that, because you seemed like that's something that you really wanted to talk about.
Well, I wanted to say that it was as happy as I was to see that, it was more ill-timed for our campaign, selfishly, just because I really do think that was one of the things that brought out way more Democrats into this municipal election. Was that they did not want to see, even though City Council has no legislation over abortion, that is a state congressional issue.
Yeah, you can't do anything. You have no control. But the people don't know that, though.
Right. And I coming into the last couple of weeks into the election, I had multiple people email me specifically for that reason. Most were unaffiliated. I had one Republican or two Republicans. I even had one Democrat who said, I'll vote. This is the first time I'm going to vote across party lines. And they said they would vote for me because, and excuse me, that wasn't actually an abortion issue. That was a public safety issue that she said she would do that. But I had a lot of people email me, even a Republican, say, are you remotely open for, and it, you know, they couple it as women's rights, you know, you know, that sort of term out of abortion. And so, you know, I kind of gave my answer, and I just clearly ended the email of, because she asked me, what are your thoughts on Roe v. Wade? I'm like, well, that's sort of an open-ended question.
That's a really long answer.
Clarify this a little bit for me. And so basically her bottom line was, where are you on, are you for any abortion? And, you know, and so I gave her, like, I'm more for contraceptives and access to contraceptives, but let's try to deal with the preventative piece. Like, let's put more resources into the preventative piece, more so than, okay, I have this baby, you know, I'm pregnant and abortion's my only option.
Right.
And there's so many other options, like pregnancy resource centers and things like that, and adoption. And so I just ended it, and I said, this is where I stand. I said, if this is not the answer you're looking for, then I'm not your candidate. And she just said, thank you for your honesty, you know? And so it was very
I can appreciate that.
Yeah. And I've wrestled with this one because, you know, before I had very black and white views, and I still do to an extent. So let me explain this.
Sure.
You know, I am black and white in terms of, I am very much pro-life. I think life starts at conception. But in terms of, I've learned from a couple of different people who were candidates in other states, as well as also candidates long-term that are running again, or, you know, have run in the state congressional house and things like that, where you have to take on a lens of being a Christian, but not pushing all of your Christian views on a public that doesn't hold those same values. And so it's like, how are you going to govern? And then how are you as a Christian? And a lot of those two line up together. And I may not be explaining this well, but how do you fit all of the people that don't hold the same faith, don't hold the same viewpoints as you, but you're trying to sort of govern all these people, but then you also have this core belief of being a Christian. And so I talked to someone about, you know, who is a strong believer, you know, is the daughter of a pastor, and she really put forth a lot of the effort in terms of the heartbeat bill in South Carolina. And so a lot of it is, okay, you have to start with one legislation, get there, and then you have to change the culture and the mindset of the population. Because right now it's either abortion, you're for it, or you're against it. And right now it's like, okay, let's look at first trimester, and where some people that are pro-life might look at that as a loss, we'll look at it as we're not having to deal with any of the other abortions later on in life. And then you start changing the culture, and then you go for 6 weeks, and then you go for 0. And not to say that going straight for no abortions is the wrong way to go. It's just, I had to sort of navigate this area of like, okay, what am I okay with? What do we need to go with? Personally, I'm not okay with these things, but how do you play that into governance? And that was really hard. It was really hard.
That does sound difficult.
Yeah. Am I going against being a Christian? Am I going against the Lord in all of this? Is it? So it was the outside of public speaking, it was probably the least favorite part of trying to run, but it was good because it allowed me to sort of look at viewpoints and think about things a little bit more, I don't know, abstractly or even technically to a degree.
Mean, you're looking at it from a different lens that people like, us on this side of it are not looking at it from. And so I understand, as you explained, I understand what you're trying to say is that, you're trying to impose God on a godless people. And so, yes, we can try to put these restrictions on, but a lot of the change that needs to happen, you're correct. It's a cultural change that you're looking for. We were kind of having a thing going on. There's these drag queen story hours that make it, that are making it around, from what I've guessed, 29 states, at least 2 cities within each of these states. And I was really worked up about it and trying to get it canceled. And I was talking to my significant other, and he's like, Jordan, you're just trying to cover a symptom. The real issue, like, because they're going to come back. They're gonna come back, and they're probably gonna come back stronger. And so again, he wasn't discouraging trying to get rid of it, but you're saying something really similar. Is that it's just kind of almost band-aiding it, and not trying to say that legislation is just a band-aid, like stopping abortions after the first trimester is a huge deal. That's really great. And so you're taking it from what's practical to get that number down, as opposed to just trying to outright ban it. And you have to speak to it more, because again, I'm just kind of spouting out my thoughts, but there are some states that maybe you can do it at 6 weeks, and that works, and that population it can fly a bit better. But if you're able to like slowly progress, I feel like that's kind of what happened with Roe v. Wade a little bit too, is a long process of getting the right judges in there, and a lot of people on the ground for the pro-life movement. And from what I know statistically too, people are not as pro-choice as our more crazy politicians are that want 9 months. And, most Americans are not like that.
We did a lot of segments on that. It seemed that most people that were pro-choice or pro-abortion wanted it to be very rare. Just the really rare instances. They didn't want it to go up to 9 months. Now people have started to go that way. The feminists have gone that way. The progressives have gone that way.
Yeah. I think New York passed their law, right? Didn't they say 9 months?
I mean, New York, California.
New York just needs to go.
I can tell you that
if they broke off of the United States and floated off to China, I would probably be okay with that.
I can say the main body of the state of New York, because I used to live up there, just wishes New York City would break off and become its own thing. They don't want their taxes. They don't want their politics. When I lived there and got to vote, it would have been Obama's second run, so probably 2012 when I got to vote. I wanted to see what the ratio was of Democrats to Republicans, and it was 7 or 8 Democrats to 1 Republican.
Wow.
So we got ratioed hard because of the city.
Yeah.
Is like, even though the mainland is the main part of the state is largely conservative and Republican, there was just no winning against the city. The population just completely decimated the rest of the votes.
Yeah, that same home state of New Jersey. I think we always joke that the North should be a different state than the South part of the state, because I grew up around farmlands, and I was telling you earlier, like, my hometown is Cedar Water Lakes and log cabins, and we have
that sounds very peaceful.
It's very serene, and I went back 2 weeks ago because my parents are planning to move down here, and so I was trying to get my one last trip in, and People don't think about that in New Jersey, you know, and they don't think about, hey, New York, it's the whole upstate New York. It's beautiful. And you have the White Plains and you have all these like just awesome places in New York that tend to be more rural and conservative. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, that does happen. I'm going to switch our gears a little bit for our last part of our episode, unless there's more that you want to say on local politics, which, you know, I honestly feel like with most of our guests, we could talk for like 4 hours because I could just talk all day and listen to people talk all day.
Well, I will say this on local politics, at least from this campaign is, you know, a lot of people don't realize, and they say, okay, here's where the breakdown was that there was 4 Democrats and they came above us, the 4 Republicans, right? There was a 12,000 vote split between their lowest and our highest, which was really unfortunate because we really did feel, you know, we kept on talking to Democrats that are like, I'm going to vote straight Republican tip. I can't tell you how many people I went up and they were just saying, I'm so sick of where the city is. I want to see a change. I'm voting Republican. So we really thought there would be more of a kind of this intermingle sort of mix of candidates. And what ended up happening, I think, kind of going back to the point of the Roe v. Wade, is that happened right at the time where we're a couple of weeks away from our general, and it brought out more Democratic voters because they did not want a pro-life person on the campaign or on council. And so, or it was one of those catalyst topics that they didn't know what city council did or didn't have jurisdiction over. So they're like, no, I need to vote against this because, you know, in our door knocking, I mean, we door knocked every week. We had anywhere from 10 people to 40, 50 people coming out to door knock with us every weekend. I mean, the movement that happened that, you know, that we put behind all of this was incredible. And I say we, and I've played this very small part of it. I was really on the coattails of everyone else. And they swarmed me in this because they knew I was a mom of a toddler and that my husband was gone a lot of the time.
Stronger in numbers though.
Stronger in numbers. And so I'm just leaning into that. But, so we had that 12,000 vote difference. I mean, we hit 55,000 houses. From what I understand from the MEC GOP, we hit 55,000 houses.
That's really good.
I got 25,000 votes. It was consistently about a 300-point difference between the number 2 spot, number 4 spot. I came in at number 3 for Republicans. And then the top one was Kyle. He got more unaffiliated and Democratic voters. He's probably our more moderate candidate, I would say, in terms of Republicans. And he was a transportation writer, and he had so many great things to kind of offer. And I think a lot of people jumped over lines or were unaffiliated voter for him. So he got about 3,000 vote difference than us. But even still, 12,000 votes lower than Smuggy Mitchell, who really shouldn't even be a candidate because he owns 25% of a company, and that's a conflict of interest with the city.
A little bit.
Oh, that sounds like it.
You can't have more than 10%. Yeah. And he's had multiple issues. Anyway, that's a tangent, but I digress from that. But we did have, 55,000 voters. I mean, it was a municipal only. It was a summer election. It was off season. So we had those things we thought could be going for us, but maybe against us. The Roe v. Wade hit, that was a negative, but we had 22% of Republicans come out.
That's an incredibly low number.
Yeah.
One of our previous guests, was Michelle, right?
Yeah, Michelle
mentioned just a horrible turnout for Republicans. I think that's one of the things that makes me nervous is that we're seeing, I mean, we were just looking at how many people have jumped ship from the Democratic Party, and they're like, all right, I'm going to vote for the Republicans, but the Republicans actually have to do something. Right. They actually have to come out. And for 50 years, they lost the abortion argument ever since Roe v. Wade was first implemented, and just now we've seen it get overturned this year. I'm like, okay, great. Don't lose your momentum just because you won a victory. Like we have to. I feel like historically Republicans have just kind of slowed the progress of what the Democrats have wanted to do.
They don't know how to use power. They don't. That's the issues. They're too scared to use power when they have it, and that's the things. Like you could have good people, right? Good people like you running. If no one shows up, why does it matter? You know, and that's unfortunate, right? Is that we have to show up. We have to actually put a little bit of use the rights that we have in this country that we have for now, and then use them to vote for people and to actually be, you know, slightly involved in your society. I think there are some because I listen to a lot of different church people, and I'm sure you have, people like this too, where they're like, I'm just a Christian. I don't want to be involved in politics in any way, because these are separate. They don't touch. Two cheeses don't touch. We're not gonna do that. And I think there's a way to be involved in politics as a Christian without it consuming your entire being.
Yeah, I have like 4 points that I kind of want to almost full circle this. So Jack Hibbs was the guy I was thinking about before. So that was the pastor.
Okay,
he might be in California, maybe Colorado or somewhere. But but going back to it is a disservice for a church not to talk about politics. I think because one, a lot of people aren't educated. I think people are trying to figure out, okay, how does my faith match with politics?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be this spiritual leader, I don't think the pastor should be the head. It should be your relationship with Jesus Christ. And you shouldn't get all your information from a pastor.
Yes.
But a lot of people do. They go and they learn from their pastors. But I think where churches, unfortunately, don't breach this topic is because a lot of them are under the 501(c)(3). And I know there's an argument, and this might be controversial, of whether or not you just get rid of the 501(c)(3) and churches really shouldn't be a nonprofit. And there goes our tax write-offs.
That's a whole podcast.
And again, that's why I kind of prefaced it with being controversial.
Yes,
but there was a I can't remember the church. He's a guy out in Oregon. I'll send you the link, but he did a fantastic job in actually separating church and politics and where God is, and how they, there's the God in politics, there's God in family, and then there was another section. But he just did a fantastic job. There's 2 sermons that he did, and he touched on politics in the church. And I think he just did such a fantastic job at really sort of clarifying it and almost organizing it for people to understand. And so I'll find it and send it over to you guys, because I really do think it was helpful for me, as well as I've kind of told other people about it, and they also agreed. Again, not to say that he's the only one to go with, and not to listen to other people, but that was one that I had listened to during that time. But some of the other points and I'm going to see if I can sort of
tie it in a nice little bow.
Bring it together.
Yeah, it was, with Trump, even though you love him or hate him, and I always go back to, have you heard of Fleckus Talks?
No.
Okay,
maybe?
he's a podcaster. I don't know where he's at, but how I got into him is that he would do a podcast that was Trump's not that bad. He would basically talk about his good points and be like, yeah, he didn't, he says things. And, even Trump gave himself a D when it comes to personalization, but A in terms of business and things like that. I remember that during one of those interviews. But Fleckus Talks did, Trump's not that bad. So whether you like him or hate him, he really did open the door to kind of be like, where are you going to be? He, in terms of churches and also politics? I know we have this huge MAGA push with everyone, and you're very,
it's pretty big,
it's when you meet a MAGA person, they're very, hard, on that side. And so, but he let you know where you stood and where your neighbor stood. And so I think that was actually it was interesting. It was obviously really revealing for not only local politics, and national politics, but even in sort of relationships too. And for me, this whole journey through these last couple of years with COVID, and I know we didn't even get to talk to about my husband being a pilot and the mandates and all that, but this was really sort of this whole time period. It allowed us to see, okay, who do we want in our foxhole? Mm-hmm. Who are our people? And that really, it was really hard because it was, I wouldn't say limiting, but it was really hard because we felt like we were sort of lost in a group of the sea of people that we knew, but we didn't really have a home. We didn't have community. And so we're slowly finding that. And this campaign has really helped that, because it's allowed me to be part of my people. And find people that are like-minded, not only spiritually, but then also politically, And again, I don't think it's healthy to be around just one group of people. I do think you need to be around people that you can have a discord with and a good conversation. And I think it's really great that you guys are bringing on multiple different types of people here.
Well, that's the future goal. We haven't done that yet, but we are. Okay, well, to you, the viewer.
But to have those sort of conversations, because you can't grow without, having them.
Well, you kind of live in your own little bubble and you don't really experience different viewpoints outside of your own. Yeah. You don't learn how to argue them if you don't. But you wouldn't have someone who's just vehemently against you as your close friend, There's kind of like different spears, like you said, like your foxhole. It's small,
Yeah.
Small. Yeah. And then you kind of expand out and then, you have relationships with people out here. But they're not going to be the same because you guys don't have those shared values.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I had some other thoughts, but I'm not sure how to tie them all in. So I'm just going to end it there.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. We like all of your thoughts so far and we're enjoying them very much. But I think, I don't even know how long. We've been going.
Remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm like looking at the time like, wow, we've been going for a little bit.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah, sorry. So what I was talking about in terms of the Republicans, it only being 22%, it was really hard and just kind of, it was disappointing. But at the same degree, the silver lining is that was more of a push than we have seen in prior municipal elections. Again, if we were running with the U.S. Senate seat that's happening here in November, I think those numbers would have been a lot different and more intermingled than, like we originally thought it was going to be. Here's the other thing too, is there were 17% of people that actually came out in the city, which is really sad because 17% of 900,000, not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot comparatively, whatever that math ends up being. And so that was more than what they were expecting. Usually municipal elections, you see 5%, 8%. That's what we were expecting. And we saw 17%. Again,
take the
other side. But it motivated people. And so with that push and more Republicans coming out, and for whatever reason they didn't come out for, whether it's they gave up on Charlotte because it's a Democratic city, it was the summer, so they were gone, they didn't know about it, whatever the reason is, there was more coming out. And that's the silver lining. So I think there will be more in November.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point, and I don't have any arguments. I don't have anything to add because you tied it up so well. So for our last bit of our segment, we've been going for a little bit, but I think it's an interesting topic. So I want to spend just a little bit of time on it before we wrap up. That's okay with you, Connor?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
It would be sad if you said no, because then it'd be awkward for everybody listening to this.
That'd be fine. We're done.
No, Connor is the misogynist, says, no, I decide when we end. But you mentioned that you are a physician's assistant, and you kind of talked a little bit about, Ben Carson, Rand Paul. Kind of talk a little bit about what you do, because you said that you do functional medicine. Functional medicine. I don't know, just talk a little bit about that. What on earth is that?
Yeah, I almost need like 3 hours to kind of talk about all of it.
You have 3 minutes.
So kind of what I even said politically is, and why I think it lended itself really well to the politics, was because we really try to get to the root problem for the patient. And so we're looking at data, we're thinking outside the box. We're trying to do everything we can to really figure out, okay, what is causing this problem? And thankfully, a lot of my patients are very interested. You have to be vested in your health to kind of come see us, because we're actually a cash-based practice. We don't take insurance, labs and things like that, because insurance doesn't pay for what we do. So it's unfortunate, but
love health insurance.
Yeah. So literally we do everything else. I see my patients. I'll see this. The difference is I get to spend an hour and a half with my new patients, not 15 minutes.
That is huge. That is a huge, we'll have to talk off there, but that's a huge deal.
Yeah. And so sometimes I can see a patient as quick as 30 minutes for follow-ups if it's, one thing. Generally I see them for an hour for their follow-ups. And there's a lot that, I'm usually just typing their full history, and I get from birth and even in preconception with their mom's health all the way up until now. And so if you think about it, you need almost 2 hours sometimes for certain patients like Lyme disease and cancer and things like that. But I just try to get to the root cause of the problem. We have our commonalities, just like normal traditional medicine has their, commonalities that they go after first. But I love what I do. I mean, I've been taking supplements since I was really little. My mom, my husband jokes about me calling myself a Shackley baby because I grew up on Shackley, which is a nutritional company. But yeah, I mean, so I just feel like there's a cause to, I mean, you have a symptom, let's figure it out. Is it nutritional? Is it hormonal? Is it environmental? You know, is it infectious or toxin based? Let's try to figure that out. It unfortunately is expensive because insurance doesn't pay for it, but, and we really do try to help out where we can, you know, with the patients and cost and things like that. And I work for a really just awesome guy. He's super intelligent, probably the smartest person I've ever met. And, a believer, and we share so much in terms of our viewpoints that it's kind of uncanny. Like it's just, it's really kind of cool. And we could sit almost for hours after work and talk, but yeah, so that's what I do. But I actually specialize in a couple of different things. I was in Raleigh, I was in a primarily Lyme-based clinic. And so I treat chronic Lyme here as well, and mold toxic burden, which can more or less they can manifest in themselves. And it's people who've gotten exposed to mold either in a water damaged building or
I have a couple friends that they have. They both had Lyme, and then they both had mold. So that's great.
But we treat anything from hormones to digestive issues. I have a couple kids that have pandas, and which is a sort of a brain inflammatory condition.
Okay, because when you said pandas, I was like, pandas?
Yeah, not the cute little
Jordan was immediately thinking, how do I get one?
I have. If you don't know, I have an obsession with panda bears.
Oh yeah, no, you don't want this one.
Okay, no.
And so we see a little bit of, you know, like I said, we see a little bit of everything, but I have a couple certifications under my belt, which is really cool through this whole process. And one of the ones that I really love is actually it's called the Walsh Protocol, and it's actually, and this might even be a whole nother thing if you want to do it, but this is actually treating mental health conditions with nutrient therapy. So we use,
interesting.
So we use supplements, magnesium, zinc, B6, you know, some things like SAMe and some other things that we're working with your genetics, as well as also with nutrients to try to really help you. And whether that's ADD or anxiety or depression, we try to help that way without having to use medications. Sometimes medications are needed or it's a financial thing, but we really try to not use medications in and of itself.
Okay, because that's a kind of brings up a question of like, when people sometimes hear functional and integrative medicine, they're like, okay, well, do you guys use medication at all, or you guys just use all supplements? Like, and honestly, I think to a certain extent, people would ask the question, does this even work? Or quite frankly, and I don't think this, but is it a scam? Like, have you ever experienced that?
Oh gosh, we've had people, there's actually something, I don't even want to give a name to them because I don't want people to like go visit a site and then he gets a hit. But there's people who have actively come against us. And what's actually really cool about North Carolina is it's the only state that has a lobbying board for functional medicine and integrative medicine called North Carolina Integrative Medical Society. So we're the only state that has that actually helps protect and lobby and talk to the medical board, you know, about cases that might, 20 years ago, the medical board put out a case against a physician for B12 injections, you know, which is so standard now, but it was not standard before. And so, so it's to kind of help in situations like that, which I think is vitally needed, and even in more states. But yeah, I mean, some people can look at it as like a scam, and I think those are people that don't know much about it. Does everything work for all people? Absolutely not. That's why they call it practicing medicine, even though whether you're a cardiologist or an endocrinologist or a functional medicine doctor, you are still practicing. We're really trying to figure it out. And so not necessarily everything works for all people. And so we kind of have to go through those different sort of trial and errors and process of eliminations sometimes to figure it out, which again is probably the hardest part because I get really frustrated too. Because I don't want to see the patient back. That's the goal.
Right.
Unless they're there for general wellness, and some people use us as their general practitioner, even though we don't indicate ourselves as that because they don't want to see anyone else, which I love. I have very loyal and very gracious patients. But I mean, not everything works for all people, and but we have to process through those and challenge. So, you know, one of the things I tell my patients is I'm not going to get you off of more pills. You'll be taking more pills because it will be in the form of supplements,
right?
But they will be good for you, you know. And I'm hoping they will help you in terms of your symptoms. And a lot of the time they do. But do we have cases that sometimes we're not able to help? Yeah. And that's really, really hard. That's really hard for me when I can't help a patient. Yeah. So, but we send them out, or they find a clinic and I'm like, go for it. Do this. Let me know what I can do for you. I'm willing to talk to people. I want to look at other information. I learn a ton from my patients. I mean, I can't, to have the vetted sort of resource of having patients that are doing research across the internet and talking to other people or on blogs, I can't cover that amount of space. So I really listen to my patients because they've come up with some really fantastic information.
Yeah. No, it's good. I feel like it's, you're experiencing a more collaborative effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't better someone without their own health, because they have to tell you how they feel, their history, all of that. And so it is a very much a working relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's really wonderful. I think maybe some of the benefits of integrative medicine, is that I think sometimes, and this is no hate to, just Western medicine. I happen to like it. It helps. But sometimes they're just like, okay, what's the symptom? Okay, let's put this on this, or let's just put that, where I like what you said, where I think there's probably more people that have like a root cause issue, opposed to just slapping a medication on it. And so I think there's points where medication is really helpful. And then I think that there's points where it's most likely overprescribed or not really going to effectuate the change that you want it to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, the patients that we see, they don't want to be on medication. So they're very vested in making the changes, whether that's lifestyle, sleep hygiene, diet, all that kind of stuff. They're willing to make those changes because they ultimately want to be on very little medication as possible. They would be on 50 supplements if it could get them off of their 3 medications. Like that's sort of the outlook. And they want to be educated. And so a lot of my time is spent not only listening to them and documenting what I hear, but then also educating, because I want them to learn, and so that we can move on to that next step, or again, not see them, which is sad to some degree, but at the same time, it's good because that means that I did my job.
Right. And you don't want to be going to just tons of doctor's appointments for the rest of your life. So part of it's part of it's, an efficiency thing, and where you're working with your patient towards a common goal. And when that goal is complete, that should be a win. That should be a win. And so it also shows too, hopefully that, your practice is more like, we don't want to just squeeze as much money out of you as we possibly can. It's more of, we'll have to take the money that we have to, because we don't have a choice. But hopefully you don't have to spend any more money with us. So that's kind of how as a client, that's how I would read. It's like, I don't want to spend more money than I have to.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it,
this economy.
True. And what people I think kind of forget is that without insurance, without these copays, you're not actually spending more. So like if you were to pay cash I'll give an example recent. I went to a podiatrist, a foot doctor, for something, just because I noticed it was there, and it was not anything, but I was there maybe 5 minutes and I was charged, my insurance didn't cover it, and I was charged $160.
Yep.
So if you think about it, 5 minutes, $160, and then you're spending an hour and a half with me. And I'll be really honest, with us, you're going to spend about $620, $650 for a new patient visit.
Yeah.
If you think about the equivalency of the time that you're spending for a specialist and then what we're doing with us, we're actually cheap. I know $650 is a really,
it's a stark number.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And that's not including testing and follow-ups and things like that. I get it. But when you think about it, I remember in family practice, I felt awful charging a patient that didn't have insurance $150 for 15 minutes. I mean, that was pretty standard. So we try to be as gracious, and we have given time away. We don't try to be really huge sticklers. I mean, we do see this as a ministry.
It's a business though.
It is a business. Yeah. And so, and thankfully I don't make those price decisions because it's not my office. I just work there. So thankfully I can kind of stay out of that. But if you think about it, in the realm of medicine, if you didn't have insurance, we're not any more expensive than anyone else. It's just, we don't take that copay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely.
So there's pluses and minuses to it, unfortunately. Yeah. And some people actually prefer it because they know what they're getting when they come to our office.
Right.
Yeah. And and too, it's evaluating your own health, that if you're a healthy person and all you really need is a GP, I would say don't spend the the 620, don't spend that money if you don't have to. But if you're noticing issues, and you're like, my doctor's just not cutting it, I might need something more, then it's worth considering. So I think it is an individual choice whether or not you do something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, everyone comes for different reasons, whether it's, we see chronically sick people, but I have some people that are just wellness and they just kind of want to check, and they use this, like I said, for their primary
and if they
care.
have the money, I do not have the money to do that type of thing all the time, but again, it's up to their income, their personal choice, what they want to do.
For sure. It's everyone's personal decision. And we never try to force on anyone. Like, I always give multiple options to people, and I say, what do you feel is the best, option for you? And a lot of my job is trying to figure out, okay, without delving into their finances, because I never want to know that, but just being like, hey, these are your options. These are kind of the financial realms of where you're going to do. You don't tell me, you just figure out what is the best for you. Yeah. And then sometimes, but I am having to create protocols based on what people can do. Either that is financially, whether that is logistically, they can't come to the office, for infusions or whatever, or supplements, like, or the fact that they're like, Carrie, I can only take 3 pills. Be like, okay, these are the 3 I would choose, or sometimes that's really hard, but I'm always having to make decisions based on what a person can really physically do for them to be successful. And it will take a longer period of time to a lot of degree, but it's for that patient, and that's what you're there for. You're there to help them, in that goal. And you just have to set realistic expectations when there are limitations involved.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, it could be the same with more Western medicine too, just depending. But I feel like we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we definitely have.
We've talked about a lot of things. We got to talk a little bit on the phone for like 20 minutes, but this was far more exciting.
Yeah, this is good.
This was really fun, and you guys should keep up with Carrie, especially if you're in Charlotte, North Carolina. We don't know what she's going to do next. We know she wants to do some stuff, but you should stay tuned for that. So if she ends up running for something, if you decide you like what she's saying and what she stands for, you should keep up with her and vote for her and encourage other people to do the same. But we're so excited that you came and talked to a couple of people like us. Where can people find you if they want to follow you?
It's a great question. I'll be really honest. I am a terrible social media person.
But you have one though,
Makes
right?
two of us.
I do have one. I actually created it for the campaign after a couple people that nudged me in that direction. So I do have a Facebook one where it's a committee for Carrie Olinski. So I do have that. And I'm actually on Instagram and which Carrie Olinski. And then again, my social media person kind of created this all for me. So those are not the best ways to get in touch with me. If you want to get in touch with me, I am great emailer.
Okay.
So Carrie for Charlotte, I still have that email address. So, and then Carrie is CARRIE, for Charlotte, FOR. So please email me any questions, or if you're like, hey, what are your thoughts with the upcoming election or whatever it is. I even, I've talked with multiple people that way. That's a great way. I'm happy to answer you on Facebook too. I'm just not the best communicator on that one.
And we'll make sure we link all of this below. So we'll link all of her stuff below so that you can follow her and ask her questions too, which is kind of fun.
And my office site is cfwellness.com.
Okay.
So that's my office.
If you're comfortable, we'll also put that in the description.
Yeah, sure.
If you're also interested in that type of care. Thank you again for being here. We have a lot more amazing guests coming. We have a whole marathon that we're performing next week for all these guests on many different topics. I'm not going to give it away because it's going to be good. So we'll talk to you next time.